People always ask me what pulled me back in. It wasn't the body. Wasn't the blood. It was the doll. Tuesday night, I got the call. A local woman reported something odd. A porcelain doll placed in her front window, facing the street. Nothing too strange, right? Only, the woman had no children. She lived alone. And the house? It belonged to Vanessa Crowley, a music teacher who had been missing for 3 days. I drove out, half expecting a prank. But when I arrived, the house was quiet. Lights off. No signs of a break-in. The front door was locked from the inside. I circled around, flashlights slicing through the rain. And that's when I saw her. The doll. Sitting in the second-floor window, bathed in soft yellow light from a single lamp inside the room. Her glass eyes were fixed outward, her tiny hands folded neatly in her lap. It looked, posed. Intentionally. Carefully. The window was slightly open. The lamp's cord dangled out, plugged into an extension wrapped around the rain gutter. That light, it had been powered from outside. The house had no power inside. Someone set this up. And they wanted me to see it. I radioed in for backup, but deep down I already knew. Vanessa Crowley was gone. And whoever took her had just opened their exhibit. The second floor was untouched. No signs of violence. No overturned furniture. No blood. Just silence. I stepped into Vanessa Crowley's bedroom, and it felt like walking into a memory someone didn't want disturbed. Everything was placed too perfectly. Too still. Her bed was made. A book lay face down on the nightstand, as if she'd meant to return to it. And in the far corner, her violin case sat untouched, gathering dust. It was like she had vanished in the middle of living. I moved toward the desk. The drawers were mostly empty, except for a faded red photo album. No name. No markings. I flipped it open. And felt my pulse quicken. Inside were photographs. Rows and rows of them. Different women. Different backgrounds. But each of them had the same quiet detail. A porcelain doll sitting somewhere in the frame. On a windowsill. A dresser. A table corner. Always in shadow, but always present. It wasn't just a coincidence. This wasn't Vanessa's album. It was his. A collection. I kept turning pages. More faces. More dolls. Some of the women I recognized. They'd been on our missing persons board at some point. Others were total strangers. One face stopped me cold. Elaine Morrow. Vanished in 2007. I remembered the case. We found nothing. No trace. But here she was, caught mid-laugh beside a doll with identical features to the one in Vanessa's window. This wasn't the first time he struck. It had been happening for years. And somehow, I had missed every single one. I couldn't sleep that night. The doll's glassy stare haunted me more than any corpse ever had. I'd seen violence. I'd seen chaos. But this was careful. Deliberate. Artful, almost. Back at the station, I pulled up the cold cases from the last 20 years. Women who vanished without explanation. Most were buried under bureaucratic dust, lost leads, closed files, forgotten names. But then I saw her. Elaine Morrow. Disappeared in 2007. 29. A pianist. Last seen teaching a private lesson in her apartment. No break-in. No signs of a struggle. Just gone. One photo was attached to her file, taken by a neighbor days before she vanished. She was smiling in the window of her studio. And on the sill next to her? A doll. My stomach dropped. Elaine wasn't the first victim. She was the first exhibit. I ran the photo through enhanced imaging software. It confirmed my fear. Same build, same porcelain glaze, same hand-stitched dress as the doll found at Vanessa Crowley's. The collector had been at this for 18 years. And we hadn't seen it. I printed out the photo and pinned it above my desk. Then another. And another. Each missing woman, each smiling face, each one unknowingly part of a gallery none of us ever noticed. They were all chosen, all preserved in memory. And now, he wanted me to see it. The deeper I went, the more it felt like the case was watching me. Each photo from the album gnawed at the back of my brain. Each woman, smiling, frozen in time, unaware that they were being curated like exhibits. He didn't just take them. He remembered them. Catalogued them. And now, so was I. I barely left the station for 2 days. My desk became a war zone of notes, printouts, red strings, maps, timestamps. The dolls, they weren't placed randomly. They were signals. Beacons. Or maybe trophies. I had no fingerprints. No DNA. No surveillance footage. Just images, and an obsession. Then I got a break. A retired tech from the local phone company dropped by. He heard I was looking into old landlines. Thought he'd poke around. He pulled up call records from 2007. One stuck out, a call made from Elaine Morrow's apartment the night she vanished, placed at exactly 3:03 a.m. Only it wasn't to 911. It was to a radio station. WCH 103. 4 FM. A tiny local channel that shut down in 2009. He found a tape in their archives. The host had recorded every overnight broadcast on cassette. The one from that night? I played it. Most of it was white noise, static, and quiet jazz. Until 3:05. Then a voice came on the line. Male. Calm. Whispery. She plays like she's painting silence. I'm taking her now. Then, nothing. I sat frozen, staring at the tape deck, the hiss of static still playing. It wasn't a confession. It was a declaration. And he made sure someone was listening. Most killers don't call into jazz stations to announce their crimes. But he wasn't most killers. He was patient. Careful. But not flawless. The tape gave me something I hadn't had before, a timeline. He took Elaine Morrow at 3:03 a.m. and called in at 3:05. Meaning he was still in town, possibly even blocks away when he made the call. I pulled traffic camera footage from that night, ancient, grainy stuff. Most of it was useless. But one frame stood out. A white van, driving past the station's tower at exactly 3:06 a.m. The license plate was mud-covered, unreadable, but the van itself had a dented side panel and something scrawled in marker across the rear bumper. Silence is sacred. I'd seen that phrase before. Buried deep in the 2007 case file, it had been found scribbled in red on Elaine's apartment mirror. So it wasn't just a saying. It was a belief. That's when I found her. Lauren Grady. Age 26. Vanished in 2015. An artist. One of the few victims who had actually reappeared, for a moment. She was found wandering a field outside town, barefoot, incoherent, and silent. She couldn't remember her name. Couldn't speak for months. She'd been committed, then quietly discharged. No press. No follow-up. I tracked her to a facility in the mountains. She was there, still under observation. Pale. Distant. Alive. I sat across from her in the visitor's room. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Wouldn't speak. So I asked the only question that mattered. Did he show you the dolls? She flinched. Then slowly, so slowly, she reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a tiny porcelain hand. Just a hand. Clean. Untouched. Clenched like it had been in her grip for years. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. He had let her go. But part of her had never left. Lauren Grady was the key. Not because she could speak, she still hadn't said a word, but because she remembered. Somewhere in the silence behind her eyes, the truth was still buried. She'd been the only one to escape. Or maybe, the only one he let walk away. And she brought something with her. That porcelain hand, it wasn't just a piece of a doll. It had a number carved into the wrist, 6. 6. Number 6 in his collection? Or the 6th attempt? I sent it to forensics. No prints. No DNA. Just that number, carved so precisely it must have been done by a toolmaker, not a toy maker. Back at the station, I pinned her name under a new heading on the board. The Escaped. And suddenly, everything shifted. What if there were more? I started contacting institutions. Mental wards, long-term care facilities, silent rehab centers, any place that might have taken in a woman found with no ID, no memory, no voice. One nurse called back. Said a woman named Jenna Merrow had been placed in their care in 2010, found walking down a rural road 2 towns over. She hadn't spoken a word in 15 years. No known relatives. No cause ever found for her condition. I drove out the same night. She was sitting in a garden chair when I arrived, staring into the trees like they were whispering to her. I approached slowly, showed her a photo. Vanessa. She didn't blink. Then I showed her the doll. Her whole body tensed. And then, her lips parted. Just one word. Barely audible. 7. She was number 7. That meant Lauren was 6. Vanessa might have been 8. But that's when I realized something even worse. There weren't 8 total. There were at least 8 before her. This wasn't a collection anymore. It was a gallery. And he was still adding to it. The word 7 echoed in my head the entire drive back. This wasn't some chaotic killer leaving behind scraps of horror. No, this was curated. Ordered. Numbered. It was a craft. A gallery, built over time. Years of planning. Each victim staged like they were part of an exhibit. And now I had a trail, not of bodies, but of objects. I had the porcelain hand. I had the dolls in the photos. So I asked myself, who in this town could make something that perfect? Porcelain that didn't crack. Carvings that fine. Clothing hand-stitched with eerie precision. There were only 2 doll makers on record in this entire region. One had passed away 10 years ago. The other, Gerald Whitmore, was still very much alive. He owned a small antique restoration shop just outside town. Quiet man. 73. Lived alone. I visited him that afternoon. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped into a room filled with forgotten things, broken music boxes, dusty porcelain heads, tiny glass eyes stored in velvet-lined drawers. It smelled of old paper and varnish. He looked up from his desk, blinking slowly through thick spectacles. "Detective Rawlins," he said before I could even speak. "I wondered when you'd arrive." I froze. "You know me?" "I know your eyes," he said softly. "They've been looking for me a long time." My hand hovered near my holster. "Where did you get the dolls?" I asked. "I made them," he replied. "But I didn't place them." He reached under his counter and placed something gently in front of me. A box. Velvet-lined. Inside 8 doll heads. All identical, except each one had a Roman numeral carved into the back of the scalp. I picked up the one marked 8. "Vanessa's. She brought this to me," he said. "A man in gloves. Paid in cash. Said he was preserving history." "Did you know what he was doing?" He looked at me, eyes tired. I didn't. Not then. I believed him. But I also believed something else now. The collector didn't just kill. He commissioned. Whitmore gave me everything he had. Receipts, sketches, even the original order forms. All of them signed the same way. Mr. H. No first name. No phone number. Just a P.O. box address registered in a neighboring town. When I drove out there, the post office clerk said the box was closed 4 months ago. No forwarding info, no ID ever verified. But something about Mr. H. nagged at me. It was deliberate. Formal. Like he wasn't hiding in fear. He was hiding in style. Every step of his process was clean. Ordered. He wore gloves. Paid in cash. Spoke politely. Never left a trace. He wasn't a drifter. He was local. I went back through the photo album, the one from Vanessa's house. On the final page, tucked between 2 loose pictures, I found a sliver of paper. It wasn't a photo. It was a ticket stub. Admit 1. Marionette Dreams, a living art exhibit. Hosted in Millstone 9 years ago. A traveling show that featured antique puppets, human mannequins, and lifelike doll replicas. I looked it up. The exhibit ran for only 2 nights, and both sold out. I found a few photos online. Poor quality. But in one of them, I saw the back of a man standing near the main display, a line of women frozen in eerie, doll-like poses. He wore a gray overcoat, black gloves, a scarf that covered most of his face. Not much, but enough to match the description from a woman who had seen someone loitering near Vanessa's house the week she disappeared. Same scarf, same gloves, same calm gait. He wasn't a monster in the dark. He was a man in the crowd. Blending in. Watching. Always watching. I turned back to the board, staring at the photos again. Elaine. Jenna. Lauren. Vanessa. And now, someone else was missing. The news just hadn't broken yet. But I could feel it. The collector was already hunting number 9. The storm hit the next night. Wind howled through the trees like a warning. Power flickered across town. Phones were slow. People stayed in. Which made it the perfect night to take someone. And he knew it. At 2:14 a.m., the call came in. Missing person. Grace Holloway. 27. School librarian. Quiet. Lived alone. Never missed work. Neighbors said her lights had been on until late, then gone in an instant. By the time we arrived, the storm had passed. The house was dark, cold, untouched. But not empty. On the kitchen table, laid out like a still-life painting, sat a single teacup, a photograph of Grace as a child, and a doll. Roman numeral 9 carved into its back. He was taunting us now. He didn't need to leave the dolls anymore. He wanted to. It was part of the ritual. Part of the satisfaction. But this time, there was something new. Next to the doll was a tape recorder. I pressed play. Soft static. Then footsteps. Then breathing. Man's voice, calm, elegant. Number 9 is special. She remembered my name. A pause. A soft laugh. Would you like to remember yours, detective? My blood ran cold. This wasn't about Grace. Not anymore. This was about me. He'd done his homework. Watched me long enough to know what I'd lost. What I couldn't remember. The car crash. The erased year. The blank pages in my life. And now he was using them. He was saying, "You forgot me. But I never forgot you." I looked back at the doll, then at Grace's photo. She was still alive. She had to be. And if I didn't remember soon, she'd be the next one he turned into silence. I never liked talking about the crash. It happened 4 years ago. Rain-slicked roads. A sharp bend. My car hit the guardrail and rolled 3 times before resting upside down in a ditch. I was lucky to live. They said I should have died. Maybe I did. In some way. I lost almost a year of memory, fragmented, torn away like pages ripped from a journal. Therapists called it trauma-induced amnesia. I called it a black hole. And now the man I was chasing claimed to be in it. I had no choice. I went to the storage unit where my personal effects had been kept during recovery. Old notebooks, half-written case reports, photos I didn't remember taking. I combed through everything. And then I found it. A receipt. Dated 6 months before the crash. From an art supply store just outside town. I'd bought plaster, wire, paint, thread. The kind of materials used to make dolls. At the bottom, a name was scribbled in handwriting I didn't recognize, but somehow felt familiar. 4H. I froze. Had I met him before? Helped him? Was I involved? My mind raced. I pulled up an old case log, cross-referenced every closed report I'd handled that year. One stood out. Case number 7142, subject, Howard Levant. Arrested for trespassing at a school art exhibit. Rambling about living mannequins. Released after a psychiatric eval. No follow-up. I remembered none of it. But attached to the file was a photo. My signature. My handwriting. My interview notes. I'd met him. I'd spoken with him. And I let him go. Because I didn't remember who he was. But he remembered everything about me. I sat in the dark, staring at the photograph. Howard Levant. Messy gray hair. Thin face. Eyes that didn't blink. The kind of man you forget, unless you know what to look for. And apparently I hadn't known. The interview notes were brief. I'd written that he was harmless, delusional, likely seeking attention. That he talked about stillness. Silence. Art as control. I'd called him lonely. I hadn't seen a killer. But he'd seen something in me. A kindred mind? A threat? A tool? The questions tangled as I drove to the school where the art exhibit had taken place. It was abandoned now, closed down 2 years ago due to budget cuts. But the building was still standing. When I arrived, the front doors were chained shut. Windows boarded. But the back maintenance door? Open. Like it had been waiting. I stepped inside. Dust choked the air. My flashlight beam carved narrow corridors of light through empty halls. Graffiti covered the lockers. Silence hung heavy, too heavy. Until I heard it. A faint melody. Piano. Echoing through the vent system. I followed the sound. Down a flight of stairs. Into the old boiler room. Then I saw the wall. Brick. Freshly sealed, different from the rest. I tapped it, hollow. He'd built something behind it. I smashed through with a pipe I found on the floor. Behind the wall was a narrow corridor. Damp. Cold. And lined with small alcoves. In each, a figure. Still. Silent. Eyes wide. Women. Alive. Preserved in some kind of trance. Drugged, bound, barely breathing, posed like mannequins. And at the very end. Grace. Eyes fluttering. Lips trembling. Her hands twitched when I called her name. She was alive. But so was he. Because behind me, the door slammed shut. And his voice filled the room. "Welcome back, Detective. The gallery is almost complete." The door locked behind me with a finality that echoed in my spine. His voice slithered from the darkness, calm and steady. "You were always part of it, Tom. From the moment you sat across from me, years ago. You just didn't remember." I stepped forward, flashlight beam trembling. Grace was still breathing, barely. I could hear it, shallow, rapid. The others, too. Sedated. Preserved. "I asked you once," he continued, "what makes something worth remembering? You said, what we choose to forget." Then he appeared. Howard Levant. Older now. Thinner. Pale as the dolls he loved. His eyes weren't wild, they were focused. Calm. Fulfilled. "You let me go," he whispered. "And when you forgot me, I knew. I had to help you remember." He took a step toward Grace, raising something from his coat. A syringe. I drew my gun. "Put it down," I growled. "Right now." He paused. Smiled. "You think this is about death, Detective? It's not. It's about perfection. Stillness. Art." "Then you've misunderstood art," I said. And I pulled the trigger. The sound cracked through the chamber. He dropped. The syringe shattered. And the spell broke. Grace collapsed into my arms. I called for backup. Medics. Hazmat. Everything. The basement became a rescue scene. Silent women brought out into the dawn. Some woke. Some didn't. But they were alive. He'd kept them frozen in time, in a sick attempt to make them last forever. But time, at last, caught up. Epilogue. They found records, drawings, notes. He had planned for 12. Maybe more. His collection was to be his legacy. But it ended with 9. Grace recovered. The others, slowly, began to speak again. As for me? I walk past the dolls and antique shops now without looking. I stopped collecting memories. Because I know what it means to lose them. And I know what happens when someone decides to turn people into trophies. They don't win. They get forgotten.